Chapter 1, Section 7, Distributive Property. Before we get started here, we're going to get some vocabulary down. I'm going to write an equation out here. 4a squared minus 3ab plus 2b minus 8. Now each little term in this equation has a vocabulary to it. First thing we want to learn is called the coefficients. Coefficients. Okay, coefficients in this case are my 4, my minus 3, and my plus 2. So if I was going to write my coefficients out here, I would write 4, minus 3, and 2. There's a constant on this equation also. And over here, I'm going to write constant. And my constant is this negative 8. So I can write negative 8 here. Coefficients, if you notice, go in front of my letters. And my constant is what's left out by itself. Now that we know what the coefficients and what the constants are, let's take a look at the distributive property. Okay, distributive property is like this. Let's see, we have 7 times 2 plus 3. Okay, and I'm going to distribute my 7 through the parentheses. I want you to pay attention here what I'm going to do. I'm going to write this 2 plus 3 out here. 2 plus 3. And what I'm going to do, notice the same thing that it's in the parentheses, I'm going to multiply each one of these terms. I'm going to multiply the 7 by the 2 and the 7 by the 3. So I'm going to go 7 times the 2 and 7 times the 3 out here. That's distributing the 7 through the inside the parentheses. So if I was to add this up and multiply, I'd have 7 times 2, which is 14, plus 7 times 3, which is 21. All right? This all equals 35. Sure, I could have added the numbers in the parentheses first and then multiplied, by 7, but I want to show you the distributive property in this case. In other words, distributive property can also look like this. Let's say let's replace the 2 with a letter. So we say 7 times, let's make this an A plus 3. All right? Now there's 2 ways we can do this at this point. We can do what I showed you originally and put my A plus 3 out here. But as you get used to doing the distributive property, you shouldn't have to do that. What you really want to do is you want to go 7 times the A, 7A, and then you want to go 7 times the plus 3, which would be a plus 21. In other words, what I did is I kind of skipped these 2 steps right here, and I just kind of jumped right to this step. And this would be the final answer right here for this right here would be 7a plus 21. That's using the distributive property. All right, now we know coefficients, we know what a constant is, and we know how to use the distributive property. Let's take a look at like terms. Let me write out an equation. X squared plus 8x minus 5x plus 2. First, I want to note, each one of these that are in between the addition and subtraction, these are each called terms. All right? Hence, like terms. A like term is going to be a term that has the same base and same exponent. Let's review what a base and exponent are. If I had 2 to the third, my 2 would be my base, and my 3 would be my exponent. All right? So now we know what base and exponents are. We can take a look at this equation and say my base here is x, my exponent is 2. Is there any other term in here that has an x squared, or x is a base and 2 is an exponent? We look at this and we can obviously say no. Let's take a look at the next one. We have an x. is there any other term in this equation that has an x with the same exponent? Remember, this exponent up here is 1. And we look to the very next term and we see an x, and we know this is a 1 up here. So we can say that it has the same base and it has the same exponent. So these two right here would be considered like terms. Are there any other in this equation? No, all we're left with is a 2. So we've basically found the like terms in this equation, which would be our 8x and our minus 5x. Now, what we can do with these terms is we can combine them. So whenever we find like terms, we can combine the coefficients out in front of those terms. So let's write this out again. X squared, and we can put a plus 8x minus a 5x plus 2. And we can combine these two terms. So 8x minus 5x. Remember, we're going to combine the coefficients in this case, and we're going to keep the x term the same. So we'd go 8 minus 5. We could write this as x squared plus 8 minus 5 is 3. Keep our term x on there, plus 2. And this is what this original term up here, or equation, would reduce to with like terms being combined. Let's do a little practicing with some different equations to see if we can figure out how to distribute through an equation. So let's use the first one, which would be 3 times h minus 5. Well, we know that when we have anything out in front of this parentheses, we can distribute it through the parentheses. So we go 3 times h is 3h, and then 3 times a minus 5, which is a minus 15. And that would be our final answer. Let's take a look at another one. What if we had a negative out in front of n plus 14? What could we do? We can distribute that negative through the parentheses. So a negative, like a negative 1 times n would be a negative n, and a negative times plus 14 would be a negative 14. Let's take a look at another one. Let's take a look at, let's get a little more difficult here. 15 times 3y plus 2. What would we do? Well, when we carry the 15 through, we're going to multiply this 15 by the coefficient out in front of this y. All right, so 15 times 3 is 45. We'd carry the y. So 15 times 3y would be 45y. And then 15 times plus 2 would be a plus 30. That's how we carry through and do the distributive property with this equation. Let's take one more. Let's take, and again, let's get a little more difficult. Let's go 1/3 times 12x minus 15. 1/3 times 12x minus 15. Remember back in the grades when they had you multiply a coefficient times a fraction, or I should say a number times a fraction? That's what we're getting back to. We're getting back to those days here, and we're going to do the same thing here. Now, when we multiply a number times a fraction, remember that the number actually gets multiplied by the numerator. So this could be written out here as, again, 1/3 times the coefficient of this term, which is 12. So 1/3 times 12 would be 12 over 3, or 12 times 1 over whatever our denominator is, 3, and then we'd put our x out here. And then the same would happen here. 15 times the numerator, and then over 3. So this would be a minus 15 over 3. Okay? Does 3 divide into 12? Well, sure it does. it goes in 4 times. So we can divide 3 into 12. And really, what a fraction is it's saying 12 divided by 3. Okay, that's really what this fraction is. And if the 3 can go into that 12 evenly, then, hey, we're all set. So 3 goes into 12 4 times, carry our term x, minus, does 3 go into 15? Sure it does. It goes in 5 times. So our final answer for this equation with this distributive number through is going to be 4x minus 5. I hope this helps you understand the distributive property a little bit. Get used to this, work on this, practice this. You're going to be using the distributive property a lot more in future chapters.